and welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. My name is Cassidy Cash, that Shakespeare girl. William Shakespeare mentions the word dog or dogs a couple hundred times in his plays, and he was the first to use the term watchdog. He's also credited with coining the phrase, quote, "a dog will have his day," which is featured in Act V of Hamlet, and he helped further the expression, "let slip the dogs of war." And my personal favorite, Shakespeare features a pet dog in Two Gentlemen of Verona with the character of Crab. With all of these references to dogs and man's best friend, this week we're asking, did Shakespeare have a dog? Dogs were very popular in Elizabethan times. During Shakespeare's lifetime, they were everywhere. There are lots of public records and city ordinances that got passed to protect against the massive amount of stray dogs that were just running around the streets. There were also lords and nobles who kept packs of hunting dogs. And these dogs had a higher status in the world, obviously, than stray dogs or loose dogs. But there was also pet animals. And actually, when they would do the giant roundups of stray dogs, they would issue edicts or messages out to the populace that said, if you have a pet dog, bring it in because we're rounding up all the stray dogs. And people who kept pet animals would bring them in and keep them inside and hide them so that they wouldn't accidentally get picked up in the rounding up of what were considered plague animals. Dogs would carry disease and plague, and they were blamed for the spread of plague in the cities. There wasn't a lot of understanding about how plague was spread, and the dogs got blamed for a lot of it. And so they were often rounded up and exterminated like pests because there were so many. A lot of the stray dogs really were similar to mass outbreaks of termites or mice or other things that cause disease when they gather in large groups. In her article, Dogs in Elizabethan York, Pamela Hartshorn shares evidence of an archaeological dig in New York that shows that some of the pet animals were kept a lot like what we do today. The archaeological dig uncovered a dog's collar, which was a leather collar studded with pieces of pewter, and it looks a lot like what you see dog collars looking today. So you had kind of a mix. You had these stray dogs, which were very dangerous to humans. There are records of dogs in Elizabethan England who would maul unsuspecting travelers or bite people or sometimes kill people just because they were loose and they were feral and misbehaving, all right beside animals which were kept as pets. There are records of court records where people have been brought to court because their pet animal bit someone and now they're being fined. And so we have this evidence of pet dogs existing. Now, in Shakespeare's plays, dogs are almost always considered bad. We mentioned that there's a couple hundred references to dogs in his plays, and almost all of them are used in a negative way or as an insult. And in King Lear, he seems to hallucinate and he imagines small little yipey dogs barking at him. And it's hard to tell from what's written in the actual text whether he is affectionately glad that these dogs are barking at him or if they are barking at him in reproach. Now, that's an analogy for his three daughters, and there's a lot of literary criticism that can go on there to what's actually happening with King Lear. But one of the dogs is named Sweetheart. So is that a comment on his impression of his daughters, or is it a comment on the society's opinion of dogs? Well, you're left to sort that out for yourself, but it is there. And now it does seem that dogs were not largely regarded as generally valuable creatures, but there were a few, and even Shakespeare's texts admit to this by featuring Crab in Two Gentlemen of Verona. Lounce, which is the servant in Two Gentlemen of Verona, is so committed to his dog that he ends up getting personally whipped in defense of this animal. Now, some interpretations of this scene in Shakespeare suggests that this just underscores the fact that Launce is an idiot and he should never come to that defense of an animal. And still other historians and literary critics will look at this scene in Shakespeare and say, no, it's it's a demonstration of how pets in Elizabethan England, people were just as crazy about their pets then as they are now. You can decide how you feel about it, but it does show that people in William Shakespeare's life had pet dogs. Now, the English in general have a reputation for being reserved with their affection, so it's difficult to ascertain if there was really this stoicism when it came to affection towards dogs, or if it was just not talked about. In my estimation, it seems that it was more like dogs who served a practical purpose for hunting or for a companion or a guard dog were regarded with a kind of affection that's not unlike what you would develop for someone who works for you. Maybe they aren't family, but they're loyal and they're true and you care deeply about their welfare. Hunting dogs in particular seem to carry this role of being particularly useful to the family that they served. And they had this high-ranking place in the animal kingdom because of it, and they would serve the lord and his nobles in this way. And these dogs were well cared for, well kept, and they were expected to do their job well. Now, in addition to dogs, pets in general were not unheard of in this time period, because the portraits from the Elizabethan era, many of which are featured in a display at the National Portrait Gallery in London of Elizabeth I and her people, I believe is what it's called. But they show pictures dating to around the 1580s of, there's one painting in particular of three girls, and one of them is holding on to a guinea pig. Some of the other animals that get featured in these portraits include elephants, frogs, and even a portrait of Elizabeth herself where she has a peacock. Obviously, animals played a big role in Shakespeare's lifetime, but the answer to this week's question of did Shakespeare have a dog? Well, we don't know, obviously, but I think for this one, I'm on team no, that William Shakespeare would not have a dog, and here's why I think that. I think it's highly likely that there were dogs on Shakespeare's estate, especially in Stratford-upon-Avon, where he had New Place and all of that land there. It's highly likely, with the reliance on hunting for food that they had at the time period without grocery stores and things like that, it's highly likely that there were dogs that existed on Shakespeare's land, which by the sake of his ownership of them would count as Shakespeare having a dog. But I don't think he would have necessarily had this pet dog in the way that we think of today, of, you know, this companion animal that followed him around everywhere. Although, if I ever made a movie of William Shakespeare, I think that's something I would definitely consider putting in there, is the idea of you see him walking from the playhouse to where they're holding court or his meeting that he's going to, and there's like this dog that follows him there faithfully. That's a beautiful image and certainly very fun, but I think the practical realities of going from the theater to the court makes that something of a question mark. And since I like to land on either a yes or a no in these videos, I'm going to go with being team no on this one, but it is highly likely animals played a big role in William Shakespeare's life based on what we know about pets in Elizabethan England. That's it for this week here at Did Shakespeare. I'm Casty Cash, that Shakespeare girl, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. Please hit like and subscribe on this video, and you will be notified about the next video. I do these every Saturday to bring you new information that you might not have thought of about William Shakespeare. If you enjoy learning about William Shakespeare's real life and the history that informed the plays that he wrote, and you want to travel to the places where he lived and built this lasting legacy we love to study here at Did Shakespeare, you can travel with us in 2019. September 16th through the 23rd, we will be in Stratford-upon-Avon and spending a couple of days in London over a 5-day trip with British History Tours. We will be seeing all of Shakespeare's major places, from where he was born to where he worked to where he went to school and where he was buried. We'll see the Globe Theatre, New Place, Hall's Croft, all kinds of amazing places that we will see while we're over there in 2019, and you could go with us. To learn more about this trip and to get on the list to be notified about early bird tickets that are going on sale later this month, you can sign up at castycash.com/travel Shakespeare to be added on to the notification list. We will be offering the bonus, I guess, early bird tickets is what we're calling them, but they're cheaper and we only have 8 of them. So 8 people get it for like $300 less than everyone else. So you want to be on the list so you can get notified when that becomes available and be first in line, because they're going to go like that, because we're severely marking them down to encourage you to come with us, because it's going to be an incredible trip and we don't want you to miss it. So check that out at castycash.com/travel Shakespeare, and I'll see you next week.